You're listening to the Journey podcast. The Journey is a ministry of Southcrest Baptist Church for those in college or college-aged. We hope this podcast helps you find your greatest pleasure and purpose in Jesus.
Hey, thanks so much for checking out the Journey podcast today. What's up, dude?
What's going on?
Hey, I'm David. This is Tyler.
I'm Tyler, and this is David. Are we doing that now? I feel like we do that a lot.
Should we do that? I think it might be our thing.
It's our thing.
I think it's our signature now.
Yeah, it is.
It's very unique and engaging.
No one else does that.
Yeah, it's probably nobody. But dude, what should we talk about today? Is there anything to talk about?
Nothing important happened.
Going on?
The night before this podcast was recorded. Yeah. Actually, no. I think we do need to talk about something.
Okay.
The election. What's going through your head right now? Like, if you had to sing a song.
I'd probably sing something like, I'll be there on election days.
Yeah, me too.
It's my new single.
Yeah. No, let's, I think we're just going to pause, what we normally do with this podcast is kind of like, maybe not necessarily go deeper, but like, I think just go a little more raw and unfiltered with like maybe the TNG message, things like that. And I think we're going to pause that for this podcast specifically and talk about what I think is just kind of a big kind of cultural moment. The election happened, and for a lot of our college students, this was their first election to vote in. And so I think that's interesting. And I think, I think culturally, like where we're at right now is really interesting too. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well,
this is the day after.
Yeah. Morning after. I guess technically all the votes haven't even been counted yet. I mean, it seems like everyone has called the election for Donald Trump. So
what state are they still count?
I don't think that Arizona is all the way in. Does anybody else know? Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much
Arizona.
a done deal. But there might have been one more that wasn't completely called yet. But I mean, yeah. But I'm interested, like, from conversations that you've had with college students in the Journey. How important is this issue to college students that we know? Like, I've had a few conversations with people, but like, is this something that are people that are probably listening to this podcast right now? How much do you care about this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I know a lot of them voted.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. I think too that I think just because of where they're at in life, a lot of them are more, I think, jaded towards politics. But at the same time, and I think you saw this with the election, like they crave like just authenticity. Like they desire, like even like with us, like they don't want something that's fake. Like they want you to be authentic with them. They want you to be real with them. And so I think that was, and I don't even know like where to steer this conversation, but I think for especially this younger generation, I think there was a lot of this younger generation that like is like, man, I don't necessarily agree with, President Trump or the things that he says or the things that he does, but at least I know what he's about because he's probably the most authentic person. Like that,
for better or for worse.
Yeah, for better or for worse, the most authentic person that has been on this stage, and so I know what I'm getting with him. And I think for a lot of them, it's like these other candidates that maybe, especially for the first time voting, it's almost like I don't know what to make, of these people, because I don't know what's true and what's not. And even with President Trump, it's like, I still don't know if everything he says is true.
Yeah.
But at least I know this is the real person, And so I think that's a big issue for them, is authenticity.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, and I definitely agree. Gosh, there's so many ways we could go with this conversation, but
just go trail. Go down a trail, and we'll go down
here's a trail. I got a trail to go down, but
right.
Because this is a conversation I had with Allie this morning, right? Because we woke up and it was like I had to make a conscious decision. Like, I'm not checking anything until I do my Bible study. Right? It was like I wanted so bad to go scrolling, and I was like, okay, I'm fighting the flesh, right? Like, I'm gonna do my Bible study.
Yeah.
And then, of course, immediately after that was like, okay, now it's like,
in Jesus' name, amen.
Yeah. But yeah, so we were sitting on the couch. We both finished our Bible study, and then started the conversation. And really, where we went to first was a conversation that I've been having with Allie and a few other people for a while now. Has been like
adults or Millie and Whitaker?
Millie and Whitaker, really. Yeah, Whit is really opinionated when it comes to. He just says no. Yeah, no, no. God's man. Okay, is that conversation, right? We've heard that a lot. In the church, outside the church, that kind of stuff. Like, anyways, I want to get your thoughts on it. But like the thing that I have been saying, and I said to Allie this morning, is I was like, man, what I want to always go back to is, of course, as we kind of mentioned this last week in the podcast, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we believe that the spiritual realm exists. We believe that God is sovereign. So, like, to say that anything is not something that God, don't shoot me for this statement, but like something that God ordained, right? Mm-hmm. Like, is silly. Of course we believe that God is sovereign over decisions, right? Like someone being placed in power, it's not like weird and creepy for us to say, God put President Trump, just like if Kamala had been elected, we'd be like, okay, like God wasn't like, I'm not sure who's going to be elected today. Like God knows.
Yeah.
And, but I think where that conversation has been, where like the meat of that conversation is like, how do we talk about that though? Right. Because I know that seems to me, because I feel this way too, what the jaded feelings are from a lot of people. It's not just college students, but from a lot of people, that jaded feeling seems to be partially coming from, at least on the kind of on the Republican side, like with the Donald Trump issue, has been coming from this like rejection of the idea that Trump is like God's man,
Yeah.
And so how do we talk about that issue, right? Like the balancing that, like, no, I don't. He's certainly not some holy figure, some Moses figure that we're supposed to follow.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but obviously we believe that God is sovereign over.
Well,
this
here's
decision,
the thing.
Right?
Yeah. If what your grandma posts on Facebook is true, then he is a holy figure like Moses. Okay.
Right. So what do we do with that?
Yeah.
Like,
no, here's the thing. Like, I get what you're saying. Yes, like absolutely. God is sovereign over this selection process. He knew before time began who was going to be the president of the United States in 2025, and so like this is not something that like caught him off guard or he wasn't aware of or anything like that. I think what I would say, and I don't know this is necessarily the specific question you're asking, but like what I would say is, man, like in 4 years, it's like you're gonna have to go through this process again. Yeah. And so like to put that much weight and hope and like in this specific person, in this specific position, like it's just not healthy,
Yeah.
And so like to elevate him to this position to where it's like, I mean, this is God's man who, and it's like, yeah, I don't think that that's necessarily a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
God's in control of it, and like he's not caught off guard, and like this is like he has a purpose and a plan for all of this happening the way it's happening. But like in 4 years, it's gonna be someone else. Like in 4 years, we're like Trump is gonna be history, right? Like he can't run again. Well, hopefully not.
Yeah, he can't.
And unless he changes something. And but then he'd be like what, 85 or so. I don't know. I don't know how old he is, but he'd be old.
Yeah, I gotta believe people would turn on him if he tried to do something like that.
Yeah,
right.
You would hope so.
I mean, maybe there would be people that were supportive of that, but like certainly the vast majority of people would turn on him. It was okay. Yeah,
but I think all that to say, like the point I'm trying to make is like, hey, like you're gonna hear rhetoric like, man, like life is, there's never gonna be another election again. There's life is, and it's like, no, that's not true. Like in 4 years, this is going to happen again. In 4 years, they're going to tell you this is the most important election of your lifetime. Like, and these things just cycle like over and over again. And so, like, you can choose in the moment to either say, like, all my hope and weight and joy and happiness is going to be in who gets elected or not, or you can say, like, man, who gets elected. And yeah, there's probably someone that I hope or think would be better for the country. But if they don't make it, then that's okay. Like, I mean, you could probably find videos, right? Like on social media, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, X, of people just melting down right now because of who was elected president last night or early this morning. And man, like that breaks my heart that that's where people are at, you know? I would hope that this morning, if Kamala Harris was elected president, you know, that I would go about my day like normal, you know, like that I would just be like, you know what? Okay. Like for 4 years, she's our president. And, I may disagree on a lot of issues and policies and things like that, but in 4 years, this process is going to start over again. You know, and so
well, and so, something that I think that everybody like needs to remember is that, I mean, obviously, I think you're making a good point. So it's not that we don't. It's why it's important to vote, right? So you're voting for the way you think the country should go, right? Like, and if you're Christian, who's, you know, your Christian values should influence that, all that kind of stuff, right? But like, I think it's also important to remember that there were a lot of people say, like you said, people say this every election, right? And it feels like it gets worse and worse in the past few elections, but like every election, there's all of this like, oh gosh, if they win, you know, like the world's going to end, you know, democracy's going to die and all that kind of stuff. But right, Trump was president before. Right, a bunch of people, Republicans, were scared in a similar way, like, oh gosh, like Joe Biden's not with it. It's going to be terrible if he's the president, right? And you can still disagree with things that he's done, but like we're still here, and there's certainly bad things that you could make arguments like about bad things that he's done or whatever. But like democracy didn't fall apart, and so, yeah, just the cycle continues.
Tate read this verse last night. I asked him, he was asking like, what should he read? And I said, hey, read this at TNG before we started. Psalm 47:8. Or we'll start in verse 7. Sing a song of wisdom, for God is king of the whole earth. God reigns over the nations. God is seated on his holy throne. And so, like, I think that, like, while the writer of that psalm is talking about that specific time, you know, what he's saying there is true for us today too. Right? It's not like, hey, God reigns over all the nations except the United States.
Right.
Like God either reigns over all the nations or he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so we sit here and we say, hey, this is the president of the United States for the next 4 years. But you know what? God reigns over the nations, and he's still seated on his throne today.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that doesn't cycle every 4 years. He's still there. He's still going to be there, and he's still in control every single day.
Yeah.
Right. This morning I had the privilege of, that's a weird word to say. I had the privilege. I had the opportunity to do the chapel for the elementary kids here at the school. So like pre-K through 4th grade. And that was the most stress I've ever been in my life. Like, I was so stressed to like get in front of there. I have like, I don't know, like more stress than I've ever been on Sunday or Tuesday.
Really? You
I
think
was
it's just
like,
because of like the age variance that you're speaking to? Is that part of it?
I probably,
Like little kids, like
yes.
little kids and older kids.
Yeah. Sometimes they look at you with just like dead eyes, you know, it's like, oh gosh, what's going on? But what I did with them is I talked to them about this question of like, how old is God? Right. And we went through a lot of different things. Like we went through like, who's the oldest person, you know? And like immediately they all were like, God is. And it was like, okay, like, but like in real life, like who's the oldest person, you know? And a lot of them said, my great grandma, my grandpa, my great grandma's 93. And so we talked about that a little bit. And then I pulled a penny out of my pocket and read to them, hey, this penny was made in 1978. So like, do you know anything that's older than this penny? And like for them, 1978 is like really old.
Yeah.
Like they're like, wow, like that penny is old, right? And so then we talked about Genesis 1. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, when was the beginning? And they get, you know, one kid was like, Genesis 1. And it's like, okay, you're not wrong. Like that's what it says. And then, and so we were like, well, we don't really know like when the beginning was, but we're told that there was a beginning, right? And then we asked the question, how old is God? And a lot of them were like, eternity, like he's eternal, or gave different answers. And then we went to Revelation 1:8, which says, the Lord God says that I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the one who was, who is, and is to come. And I talked to him about like that word Alpha and Omega is like our letters A and Z, right? And so I asked them, I said, what's before A? And they were like, nothing. And I said, okay, what's after Z? And they were, nothing is. And I said, exactly. Like that's what God is telling us, right? That he's always been there. There was nothing before him, and he'll always be there. There's nothing after him. And so like that's comforting for us because he was with our great grandparents. He'll be with our great grandkids. And everything that we do, everything that we go through, he's with us. Like he walks with us. And so when it says in Psalm 47:8, like he reigns over the nations, that's the nations that were there in the beginning, the nations that are here right now. Like there's never a moment in time where God hasn't reigned or won't reign.
Yeah.
And so like, man, yes, like we want people in leadership in our country who can lead us in really good ways and make wise decisions. But that doesn't always happen. And I think what that tells me is like, that's okay because God is still there and he's still reigning and he's not caught off guard by that. And so if the person that got put into that position last night, early this morning, isn't who you wanted it to be, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like your hope isn't set in that, or it shouldn't be at least.
Yeah. It's in Jesus. Yeah. That's so good. Well, and that, we talked about this a little bit last night. But what are you going to look like, right? What are people going to see when so regardless of the way you feel about the the results, right? Like, what are people gonna see when they see you, right? Like, you know, like, what are they gonna see, right? Like, love, joy, peace, right? Like, what are they gonna see? And I think that's important. It's like whatever cliche statement or whatever, but like, what would Jesus do? You know, really though, like what are you gonna do in light of these election results, right? Like, you're gonna live like Jesus. That's our pursuit, right? We're gonna walk like Jesus. We're gonna wake up every day and pursue Him, right? Like, and pursue His way, right? Be a disciple of Jesus. And so He's reigning. He's in control. And what are we going to do? It's like, well, we're going to do the same thing. Okay. Like, nothing changes. We're not surprised, right? Like, and that's a whole other route we could go with this, is like with the, so if you're really upset about this, right? Like, let's not get wrapped up in all of the, like, in the tea leaves, right? Like in how the world's going to end and how all this is going to go, right? Like, we know, like you're saying, that at the end of the day, Jesus is on the throne, like He's reigning supreme. And so, like, let's not get too wrapped up in that. And let's just live for Jesus, right? Be formed by Him.
No, and I think this goes back to a few weeks ago when we were in that disciple series. Like, the mandate is still the same for you and I. Like, be salt, be light. Yeah. Right? Like, that's what we're called to do. Whoever's president, you and I are called to be salt and light in a dark world. And so, that's what that'd be my encouragement.
Yeah, for sure.
Where are we at time wise? Do you know?
I'm not sure. We could. Okay. Yeah. Fight the flesh, right?
Fight the flesh.
Fight the flesh.
Yeah.
But really, like, I mentioned this last week on the podcast. Kind of, maybe we can land on this kind of thought, right? Like, talked about this last week a little bit about I had talked about a moment that had to do with a political conversation that, like, revealed in my heart, like, I think that I might be following the flesh and not the spirit, right? Yeah. Like, even though I hadn't done some terrible thing in this instance necessarily, I just was noticing, oh man, my heart is really consumed by politics, pre-election, right? Politics, and I can care. I want to be informed. Like, that's all good, right? But, like, I want love, joy, peace, patience. Like, gentleness, kindness, self-control. Like, I want that to be what's flowing out of my heart. And so
it's so good.
Yeah. So that's what we need to fight the flesh, right? Let's walk in the spirit. Anything else you want to say?
I want to try to say that in my Trump voice.
Okay. Okay. Let's go. And I'll sing while you do it.
Okay.
Election day.
Fight the flesh.
Fight the flesh.
Fight the flesh.
It's going to be huge.
You are sent.
Bye.